In the last video, we talked about the mechanics of type design. Kerning, leading, and then the actual design of the letter forms themselves. I'm going to highly recommend that your default be using capital letters just for clarity. But sometimes you want to break that rule just for visual interest. But notice how both of these use capitals to have that kind of full spacing. But they can make them fit into any kind of shape they want, right? That's where text blocking comes in. And then once you kind of get acquainted with that text, then you can start having more fun with it. Like I really like the sketching design here. This is by Rye Ford. Before he makes his vector for the finished logo type, he is playing with all the different, like kind of integrating the words together, finding the qualities to the letter forms he wants to play with until he gets the personality. So I think this is just gorgeous. I think this has an old-timey charm. But this is the one, especially on a tilt, that had kind of the personality that the client was looking for, right? And it still retains that fun with the tails of the Y that he's playing with in the other solutions. So you can really mess with this. I think my favorite thing here is that he gets the little U tucked into the G, and it just feels so natural. It doesn't hurt the readability at all. And then he surrounds it all with this kind of ink puddle shape. But then just like a logo, you have to think of all the different ways it might be printed on a dark background, on a light background, and have those variations. So someone I went to school with and have a lot of respect for is Akiko Sterenberger, who right from college on started working on independent movie posters. And so her site, and now she's published books on it, she's like one of the go-to people for independent movie posters and campaigns. So she did this poster for Marvel's Thunderbolts. She did this recent show called The Chair Company I need to check out, right? She did all of the key art for The Last of Us on HBO. And usually there's pretty simple elements in her designs, and she does everything. She does the imagery, she does the type design, she does the layout, she does the coloring. But usually when you look at it a little bit closer, there's more to it, right? So like in this one, Portrait of a Lady on Fire, you see kind of the textured flames, and then you eventually understand that the negative space are these two mouths coming together, right? Yeah, so there's a lot to it. And then the Thunderbolts one, there isn't anything in the negative space. It feels like there should be, but then there are the tiny little white eyes are actually the White Widow character in silhouette. So just like little things that really engage you. Yeah, so the head is the sentry, but if we zoom in on the eyes, those are images of the White Widow character. You know, the Black Widow's sister. It's hard to see when you don't see the poster in full. And this isn't just a black silhouette. If you look at the link, you'll see like the full face rendered and everything in really, really close contrast. So these same things that might interest you in your spot illustration, you can also do with a play of the type design and the text. So for the movie Dune, you have Zendaya's portrait, you know, in the sand here, because she was the bigger star for the first movie that was marketed on. Well, what's nice is that is true for the production posters, like the studio poster. For indie posters, they get free of those. So that's why you'll usually have indie poster campaigns as well. That's what these are. Because she likes to have a lot more creative freedom than you can get from like a Marvel studio poster. But they're starting to get just as much use, right? And even more effective use in promotion as the studio releases. These are all paid for by the studio, but they're done by independent producers. So yeah, Letterboxd, I don't use it, but yeah, I know people who do, and for fans of film. So we could look at any of these. First of all, as you guys research your contemporary digital imaging artists, whether it's in marketing, whether it's in advertising, you know, whether it's in fine art, you'll notice how much these artists do to make a living, right? So she produces a ton all the time. And all the work is very high quality. But one thing that makes me show her in this assignment is that she always customizes her type design for the project, right? Where sometimes it's just completely hand-drawn. Other times it's a modified existing typeface. There's just a lot to it. So let's look at another example. So these are some of my favorites that really show the spot illustration along with the type design that really kind of work for the project. And then you have Shepard Fairey, the guy who did the Obama Hope poster that you talked about when we were talking about copyright and appropriation. And something he has always been good at from his college days was integrating image and text, right? And you can see how the type design is going to fit whatever the illustration is. So once you have your type, once you have your spot illustration, you know what your physical format is. It is going to be 16 by 20 inches. And so you have to decide how to arrange them. And this is what your text blocking sketch does as well. Where do you want the image? Where do you want the text? Like, what needs to be primary? So we're arranging at least two things, an image and text. But you might have tertiary things and fourth things. So this is a little video. It's just a GIF that I created from a helpful web video. And it's just taking the same elements across what's called a grid-based design and just showing you that what we're fighting against is what's called default eye movement. So if we're just looking at a blank vertical rectangle, our eye first goes to the middle, and then it goes up here, and then it starts reading left to right, and our eye will always leave out the right side. It's like physically hard to make your eye leave out the left. Because we're American. Yes, it's a cultural preference. Because that's how we read. So obviously the strongest focal point is going to be dead center, because that's where our eye first goes if it's blank. The secondary most is going to be the upper left-hand corner, right? The very worst focal point is down here. You can hide a lot down here, which is why for all like pharmaceutical ads where they have to list the mandated risks and side effects, they put it where your eye is least likely to ever see it, right? So it's interesting to think about this. This is called layout, right? And we don't need to be as complicated as a graphic design class would be for figuring out different hierarchies of layout, but we do want to understand, is our spot illustration the most important thing for our poster? Or is our type the most important thing for our poster? Or are they roughly equal, but I like one more than the other? Because you have to make decisions about what's primary and what's secondary. And we do that right from our first kind of sketching. So let's do that. I know what my spot illustration is. It was assignment 5. So if I open up assignment 5, I have it all finished. I can just take one of the PNGs. This was the most finished one. Nope, that's not the most finished one. But that's just duotone color, and that gives me the rough shape of it. That's all I really need to worry about. So what I'm going to do is use it, just because I'm sketching digitally, and I'm going to create a sketch. So I'll call this Karl Assignment 6 Text Blocking Sketch. And this is my horse, my unicorn. And I might as well do it 11 by 14 by 350. I don't need it to be, this is just a sketch. But my poster needs to be vertical. So I actually need to rotate this. And you know what? I know what my poster size is going to be. So I'm going to change the image size to that. It's going to be 16 inches by 20 inches. Because that's the next standard size up. So 8 by 10, then 11 by 14, then 16 by 20. It's also the largest standard size we can print in the lab. And I'm going to do it by 350, even though that's way too much resolution just for a sketch. But this is what my final poster's proportions are going to be. I'm going to turn on my rulers. I'm going to drag down guides to stick around it. And then very early on in my text blocking, I might decide on the size of the border. So what does a border look like? What I'm going to do is use the rectangular marquee tool, the selection tool, select the whole thing, duplicate it, Command J, and then Command T and shrink it using Option. And that will give me a border. Right? And what I want is a border that's the same on all sides. So I'm going to hold down Shift and Option so that it's kind of equalized on each side. Then, while I have that, I hit Return, and then I use my guides to stick to that. And if you have trouble seeing it, you can double click and you can just do a color overlay on that of middle gray. So you can see what the border width is that you're designing with. And I show you that because the outside is 16 by 20, but that inside image space is actually not the exact proportion of 16 by 20. It's a little bit narrower than 16 by 20. Because when you take exactly 16 by 20, I'll show you again with black. Make a duplicate, fill it with black. Okay, so when you take that 16 by 20 frame and then you shrink it perfectly towards the middle by holding down Option, you can see how the top and bottom are thicker than the sides, right? So though this is proportionally 16 by 20, I want it to be a little bit taller so that the border is equalized on all sides. All right, now what can I do? I'm going to bring in my spot illustration. And let's see, what was the most, I think this was the most recent one. And I got to bring it on top. Nope, that doesn't have the full bleed. Doesn't have the full spectrum. There we go. That has the color holds and all the big whole deal. Okay, so now remember we designed this to be 350 pixels per inch at 11 by 14. That should be big enough to work really any size you want of the poster as long as you're not cropping it off, right? So I can play with this in a few ways. I want this to be pretty primary, so I'm going to try it there. But then I can always shrink it or put it toward the top or to the bottom. I can tilt it. I can do all kinds of things with it. But I'm going to try doing text blocking with it there. So I'm going to lock all these layers. My background, my border, my blank white. And now on top of that, I'm going to use just my brush tool. And I'm going to use a really bright red for my text blocking. No, that's going to hurt my eyes. I'm going to use a white on my gray background. Doesn't really matter how you do it. Okay, so now this is my first attempt at text blocking. And I think I know it should say this horse is on fire. And what I want is something more kind of Art Nouveau-y and kind of joyful and silly. So it'd be something like that. And then like this, right? So those are kind of the spaces I wanted to take up. I can use the advantages of digital drawing and transform to kind of fit everything in the frame. And those are the blocks, right? What's another approach I could have? I could do multiple. I could also do something that's a little bit less friendly, right? More Art Deco, less Art Nouveau. And this might be blocky, like this.